Hi guys! Today we're going to discuss the Neolithic Revolution, specifically in the ways that the Neolithic Revolution transformed human societies. I want you to really work on not copying down word for word what you see or hear during this presentation, but rather practicing your shorthand on your notes as well as abbreviations. Let's get to it. The history of the universe is greater than the history of humanity. This cosmic history, also known as Big History, has its foundations in the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago and continues to the present. The formation of the Earth occurred around 4.5 billion years ago, while the emergence of humans really only occurred 2.5 million years ago. If we put this big history into a condensed timeline, like our own January to December calendar, December would be the busiest and most significant month for humankind, since it's when we showed up to the party. And as a matter of fact, humans as we recognize them today wouldn't even be at this Great Apes New Year's Eve party until 11:54 p.m. Early humans originated in East Africa and migrated to different parts of the world. This is known as the out-of-Africa theory. Homo sapiens emerged about 120,000 years ago, and there have been no evolutionary changes in the species since then. Take note of the map on the screen and the different migration patterns that occurred and the timeline in which they occurred. Historians generally recognize three different phases of history. The first of those phases is the Paleolithic phase. This is a time when humans practiced a lifestyle known as hunting and gathering. They were often organized in small kinship groups or groups based on family and close relationships. And these groups were highly mobile as they were nomadic. They had to move around in order to find the best patch of berries or wherever the herd migrations of animals went to. And because both men and women contributed to maintaining food supplies, their societies were egalitarian, meaning that both men and women were valued the same way. Men, for the most part, hunted game, while women contributed to the food supplies by collecting either shells or nuts or laying close traps to where they had to stay close to camp. And women had to stay close to camp because they were in charge of child care. Now, some Paleolithic people made beautiful cave paintings that were significant of their ceremonial practices. This goes against the idea that cave people were like Fred Flintstone with big honkin' feet that just ran around all the time, but that they had very significant, very intricate religions that were based in animism, or the idea that everything has some kind of spirit. The second phase of history is known as the Neolithic period, and this occurred globally around 12,000 years ago, where some communities began to domesticate or control the breeding of plants and animals. Agriculture developed in at least 3 separate places around the same time. The northern Middle East Black Sea area created wheat and barley. This area is known as the breadbasket of the world, where the Fertile Crescent is. Then South China and the continental Southeast Asia, where rice was domesticated around 7000 BCE, and again in central Mexico, where corn or maíz was domesticated around 5000 BCE. And by 5000 BCE, agriculture gradually and slowly spread, eventually becoming the dominant mode of acquiring food. Now, it took a long time, 5,000 years for this gradual adoption of agriculture, and there are reasons for that. First, contact between the Fertile Crescent and Southeast Asia were minimal because the populations were, you guessed it, separated by these vast distances. Not all areas were equally suited for agriculture, and some communities developed pastoralism instead, a lifestyle in which animals are primarily domesticated, and they would live a semi-nomadic life in which they had to herd their animals to different areas depending on the weather. And finally, not all communities were attracted to settled life. We're going to look at that and agriculture's profound changes to humanity. Work increased. Agriculture required more time than hunting and gathering. You couldn't just get the sustenance that you needed and then go take a nap. You had to collect your seeds, you had to plant your seeds, you had to sow them, you had to take care of them and water them. And that took a lot more work than simply gathering what you needed to feel well and going on your day. Agriculture also created new hierarchies that were mostly developed based on patriarchal standards, even though historians and archaeologists and anthropologists generally agree that it was women who invented agriculture and the domestication of plants. Increased inequality in social relations, increased exposure to diseases in settled societies, increased negative impact to environment. Agriculture didn't seem like a good idea, and it makes sense why some communities resisted domestication. Is it true then that agriculture was rotten for society? No. It brought fundamental changes that also led to amazing things. This greatly increased the food supplies, allowing families to have more children. More children means that the population is going to explode. Food surpluses would then allow for specialization in labor. Not everyone would be required to collect food, which means that they can go off and they can create buildings, they can create language and a written language for literature, they can create artwork. And although early agricultural societies needed large numbers of farming, that specialization of labor would eventually develop over the millennia into cities. And for many millennia, the Neolithic Revolution was the most significant turning point. But by 1750, a new phase in history, known as the Industrial Era, began, similar to the Neolithic Revolution, but it spread much faster and radically altered human societies. Like the Neolithic Revolution, the Industrial Revolution had a profound impact on human societies and environment. But the changes of the Neolithic Revolution and the Industrial Revolution were not just material, tangible changes, but also changes in consciousness and the way that people think. The Neolithic Revolution led to humans paying greater attention to the seasons and the forces of creation, as they were now more at the will of environment trying to create their food supplies. And changes occurred worldwide in farming communities in correlation with the creation of agriculture. Solar calendars were created with complex religious and power-hungry gods to be kept in mind. Trying to communicate with these gods led to the construction of careers in religion, back to that specialization in careers. Priests and priestesses, shamans, oracles, and other religious figures were sought after for their ability to divine the future and keep their civilizations going. Monumental architecture was constructed using specific geographic and astronomical coordinates to please the gods. And these megalithic sites, those Egyptian pyramids, the Mesopotamian ziggurats, the palaces and the temples in Mesoamerica, are still being excavated, and discoveries continue to emerge. Take Angkor Wat, for example. Although it's not an ancient structure, this temple was constructed in Cambodia during the 12th century for a Hindu prince, but by the end of the century it was converted into a Buddhist temple complex. The temple itself is enormous. It covers about 402 acres in size. In 2015, though, planes took laser surveys of the land around Angkor Wat and discovered an ancient lost city that had been constructed around the palace complex. This was the ancient part where that specialization of labor occurred, where agriculture led to the creation of this new grid-like pattern in buildings that were dedicated to the gods. Now, for more information on Angkor Wat and the use of LiDAR scans in archaeology, all you need to do is check out this quick 1-minute video, and you'll find more information. Anyway, thank you guys.